Okay, and now I've made some progress with my first pass with the shapes and all my values dialed in. And you can see over here that I went ahead and extended my my value scale in order to just get a little bit better range in my first setup here. If I want to add a little bit more of this shadow, I could maybe sample one of these darker colors or darker values, go a little larger with my brush size, and then take the hardness down to 0. And because I don't want to build up value as if I was painting on top of it, I'm going to go ahead and use one of the blend modes. So I'm going to go to multiply, and I'm just going to apply it to the areas, turn off okay, pressure sensitivity. I'm going to do one last settings check over here. I'll turn off shape dynamics just for now. Go away, good. And drop the spacing down, hardness is at 0. Take the flow way down. So again, notice is how quickly you end up with a result if you have the flow turned up pretty high. So taking the flow down a little bit, put that out of the way so I can take a look at what the shadows are doing. Let's do a little light hit using the brush set to the multiply blend mode. So I can build that soft edge shadow, and I can of course use similar techniques along the body of the car. Okay, if I find that that's going to possibly help a little. Okay, same thing back here. A couple of quick little hits, and maybe there's just a little suggestion of a shadow being cast onto the canopy there. I'm going to ride that outer edge of this frame that goes around, maybe supports the canopy, the little bubble there. Bring up some edges, get a little closer. And of course there's always room for more detail here and there. And if I ever overshoot or kind of go over an area, if I go too far, I can always return with a return with an opaque hit of color, value, whatever I need. Okay, all right, so from here, I think I'm about ready to, well, first I'm going to go ahead and hide the lines so you can see what we have. There's still some room for finessing the line work. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I just want to move into a coloring technique. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate the part of the layers panel that I'm using to desaturate the colors in the reference. This is where labeling carefully can be helpful. Car, black and dove. Okay, I know what that means now, so turn that off. And now I have access to the full range of colors from the original image. All right, so I'm going to add one more layer. I'm sorry, I already have a layer waiting for me, my color layer. And if I just start going over here to my brush, I'm going to option click. And let's say on this layer I decide to keep everything set to normal, and I start by keeping everything at normal for the brush, almost maximum flow. You can see here that I need to set this layer to the appropriate blending mode, depending on which effect you're aiming for. You'll decide, okay, I'm going to go with color. And again, I'm going to allow myself to get most of it with big broad strokes just to get my kind of running head start. Then I can maybe shift to a grayish yellow, take care of this nose thing, the intake, I guess that's what that is. Okay, even if I have a really faint gray there, I am going to be able to apply some hue changes. Okay, even if I go with gray to sort of knock out that overspray of red, I can do that. And again, because I'm zoomed out a bit, I know that I will have to go in a little bit closer and clean up some of those details. Maybe there I have actually some color down here as well. Really subtle color changes applied to the gray areas, I think will help to enliven some of those spots. I can even paint with a gray or a white, the shadow area, or sample what's currently there, drop my opacity, so I just hit the number 1 on my keyboard to make that 10% opacity. Take this back to white. And so this process of coloring can involve a lot of kind of back and forth with your color choices. E for my eraser tool. Maybe I don't want any color on the wheels in that area. I'm getting a little bit closer. Say, okay, I might need to put something on that seat in there. So maybe there's a kind of an elegant leather. Checking my settings. Color layer. Set the color. Command D. Anything selected. So why is this not? Oh, I'm on the eraser tool. B for brush. And now I can start painting. So the more time you invest in getting your values as accurate and possibly as detailed as you like, the easier it's going to be for you to apply some effective coloring techniques. Okay, adding some weathering, some desaturated spots there. Maybe this part also has kind of this rusty, almost titanium color, which titanium sometimes is, I believe, orange, metallic orange, before it oxidizes. Could be wrong about that. I remember it from a model kit of the SR-71. I think I made mention of the colors you should use. Add a little bit of orange. I remember that in the instructions. Add a little bit of orange to the silver. Okay, eraser tool again. Right, so plenty of time plenty of work to do in terms of cleaning up, equalizing, or getting things to be more and more and more believable. And because I have all my values on the layer below, it won't take much effort to return to those values on that layer and make some improvements, make some changes. All right, it looks like I'm kind of leaning toward, maybe a rendered cartoony style. I can also, going back to the values layer, maybe explore some of the smudging techniques I talked about, just to make sure that that option is available. I'm just going to look down here. Some blending. This particular smudge, this brush for smudging. Okay, something a little more painterly. I like that word. Okay, and Right, so this is where we can get really fussy with the details if we want. If you're interested in a general strategy for deciding on where to put the most effort in your piece, concentrate on the areas where you want people to spend the most time looking. So just to really drive this home, let me go ahead and save and duplicate this layer. Watch what happens when I deliberately mess up the edges of things that are away from my area of focus. Let's say this is my area of focus. And so what I'm going to do is just go in, kind of mess up all my edges, or some of them, as I get further and further away from the focal point. I'm going to let those details sort of dissolve and just get disrupted. So I'm planning on having you all do an exercise in portraiture. So keep this strategy in mind. It's going to come up again. The human eye is not able to, currently, with so many things happening with cybernetics and understanding how the brain works, getting in there and controlling what the brain does. Maybe this is no longer a fact, but the current science, I believe, says that the human eye cannot focus on several things at once. Now, we can pay attention to a lot of different things in terms of our hearing and maybe process multiple smells, but when it comes to focusing on an object, our eyes are actually quite limited. So you can use that to your advantage in a painting and just say, okay, I put most of my effort in terms of detailing and maybe even having contrast in the areas where I want people to look. Everything else I might allow to come a little bit out of focus. And not only out of focus, but maybe even reducing the contrast here and there. So another example of this, I might decide that this area of high contrast versus this area of high contrast and this area of contrast, they're all sort of in competition. I might argue that they allow the eye to travel around the piece, but if I really want to be disciplined with this way of thinking, I'll just go ahead and give myself permission to drop these values. I'm going to go ahead and use darken. This is a more subtle version of multiply. Just let some of these areas reduce in intensity, in contrast. And now all of a sudden, this one isn't singing as loudly. Neither are these parts. Right? Ian McKay, this is a concept artist who worked with Lucasfilm for a while on the episodes 1, 2, and 3 as a designer. He talked about this idea of murdering your darlings, not being afraid to sacrifice a part of the piece. You can have multiple things in a piece that are working well, and you can totally fall in love with them. But if you really want the piece to feel complete without multiple elements competing with one another, go ahead and sacrifice something. So you saw that it didn't really diminish the piece, me deciding to knock some things back or get rid of some of it. It actually added some interest in those areas and at the same time kept the focus or shifted the focus more so to where the driver would be. Okay, there's the color. Okay, so something subtle. Okay, and if you just spend some time with this approach, and I could spend maybe another hour or so really perfecting this, then you might end up with another level of painting that you may not have seen before in your work. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and then after this video I have just a little bonus info. And because most of all of the brush work here was done freehand, it'll be good to see another way of approaching isolating these areas. If you wanted something that was a lot more crisp, that is a lot more controlled in terms of giving you the edges that are closer to what you're seeing in the original. So in 3.4, we will be looking at another sample file. I'm going to give this to just one more pass, kind of get a little bit more shine on this vehicle here. But this is an example of how you can use paths over here in the paths panel to isolate parts of your illustration, and then the paths themselves, after being drawn with the pen tool, can then be loaded as selections the same way that we're able to load alpha channels as selections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this technique, this method, which involves using some vector-based drawing tools. All right, see you in the next video.